there was lots discussed and considered in January Tynwald. The members obviously had enjoyed their Christmas break and seemed very much refreshed and up for the political fray. A range of questions, some repeats actually on the question paper, which led to two, at least, of the questions being run together or asked separately, but then answered together. Before we get to those, a couple of the questions that I have highlighted anyway on my question paper, certainly ones I followed up with some of the members, was the one to the Enterprise Minister from the Speaker, how previous regeneration schemes were evaluated. Well, the more recent schemes have been evaluated. Effectively, though, the big schemes that you would have noticed, where it's included, I think included parts of Strand Street, certainly included lots of the redevelopment work in Ramsey, in Castletown, Port Erin. I think there was even one in Port St Mary. These schemes haven't been assessed. And many millions of pounds were spent on them, or at least if they have been assessed, the Minister for Enterprise wasn't aware of it, and certainly that didn't form part of his consideration or his department's consideration when it came to the production of the local economy strategy. Perhaps the big surprise of the day on Tuesday, anyway, was Ms. Edge, Julie Edge, member for Onken, asking the Health Minister if she will make a statement about the possibility of strike action by doctors. And Claire Christian, the new minister, had pulled a rabbit out of the hat and basically said, well, actually, we've reached agreement that at least the strike action would be called off for the time being, as a deal had been struck between the various negotiating parties in relation to the doctors and Manx Care, and it was hoped that this deal would resolve the dispute. Of course, what the minister couldn't tell us was the detail as to how the expected pay rise, I think it was 8% increase, how that was going to be funded. And members wanted to know, was this extra money that had to be found from Treasury, or was it cuts to services? And the minister's answer was neither, which is intriguing and possibly means part of the deal, at least, includes the changes in terms of the way in which services are delivered, which means they can be delivered more efficiently. Other questions which were of I certainly thought were of interest. I mean, sure, all the questions are of interest, but ones that I have starred on my question paper to have a look into a bit further. One was whether funding has been provided to all impacted departments and agencies to cover the expected increased costs of the relaunched Classic TT, and whether all impacted bodies were consulted before the decision was made. That was a question from Mr Hooper, Ramsey MHK, to the Minister for Enterprise, Tim Johnston. And certainly Mr Hooper's take on it was, well, actually, no, they hadn't been asked about it. The decision was taken after the various budget rounds had been finished. That's for this year's budget. So departments wouldn't have had time to bid for extra funding, and it would appear that that they are going to have to find the extra costs from within their own resources. That's Minister Hooper's take. Oh, sorry, Minister. He's no longer a minister. Mr Hooper's take on it. Minister Johnston had a slightly different view, it's fair to say. Then further down the question paper, we had a question from Mr Moorhouse to the Minister for Infrastructure. What mechanisms are in place to ensure roads and substructures are returned to the same or higher standards upon completion of work undertaken by the Manx Utilities Authority and others? Well, I know because I was responsible for the legislation that there is a requirement in one of the bits of highways legislation that requires what are described as statutory undertakers to repair to the middle of the road any roads that they dig up. I'm not sure that that was quite the answer that Mr. Moorhouse received, and the general view from the infrastructure minister, particularly this is in relation to Balacry Park in Colby, was that it's the full refurbishment of the road that Mr. Moorhouse is asking for can't be justified at this stage. A whole load of other questions were asked. One question from Ms. Edge was in relation to artificial intelligence and how that will work in schools. Also from Ms. Edge was what the annual cost since inception has been of the employee relocation incentive. And that was from the DFE Minister, Tim Johnson. So then we didn't finish the question papers in one chunk, it's fair to say. The first, or the allotted time for questions finished at 12:30, and it was agreed that the remaining questions from 19 down to 23 would be asked at the end of the rest of the order paper, and that's how it eventually happened. So then we get to the order paper. Mr. Cannon, the Chief Minister, gave a statement on efficiencies in which he described a change that was effectively trying to reduce the headcount of government. The idea being that the government is too big, and that by creating greater recruitment controls, you can reduce the size of government. And that may happen. Perhaps it will. I know previous attempts by Council of Ministers, certainly what the Council of Ministers I was involved with, the headcount, actually caps on headcount resulted in contracts being taken out to deliver services that were deemed to be essential, which then actually added to the overall cost. It reduced the number of people working for government, but it did actually cost more money in the long run. So it'll be interesting to see how that particular efficiency drive is delivered. But certainly the Chief Minister is keen to deliver 10 million of savings a year for the next 5 years. So that's 50 million over that 5-year period. There was then, as items 4 and 5 were withdrawn, a healthcare reform statement, and I'm hoping we'll hear from the Minister for Health and Social Care on that, and in a lot more detail on a perspective coming to you in the not too distant future. Then we moved to the establishment of discrete schemes. The Minister for Treasury to move 16 million to be spent, I think it was in relation to, there was Department of Infrastructure and Department of Health and Social Care. 5.3 million of this was to develop the second phase of Ballacubban housing project, which I think commenced back in 2007-8. So it's probably well overdue for the second phase to be completed. Then we got down to, and actually on item 7, the Speaker raised the not unreasonable point. Certainly it was a not unreasonable point in my assessment, bearing in mind I tried to find out a bit more about the schemes, or this £16 million worth of funding, and there was some detail, but not very much, it's fair to say, and that's all that's available to the public. As the Speaker said in his comments, the Tynwald members had got more detail in a briefing, but it would be nice for them to be able to share with their constituents more detail as to how these schemes are actually pulled together, the reasoning behind them, and how the finances work. And that is currently not information that the public can get a hold of. Then we moved down to, because the Cabinet Office Minister wasn't present, so the Cabinet Office Department plan was withdrawn. Strategic Air Services policy was moved. Again, there was some discussion about the lack of transparency, and effectively, again, the view of the Speaker, Mr. Watterson, was that the Economic Development Fund seems to be a bit of a slush fund for the department. To a certain extent, I can understand why you wouldn't want to go into detail as to how much funding is given to each airline in relation to each route, but perhaps a little bit more transparency, particularly for Tynwald, which is there effectively to scrutinise government. Perhaps that would have been helpful. The local economy strategy, again, that came in for a fair amount of mild criticism. I think the general principle of the scheme was agreed, which is to try and use all means available to support local businesses, particularly reviving town centres, areas of commerce and the like. But again, the lack of transparency in relation to the funding was questioned again by the Speaker and indeed other members, including Mr. Hooper. There were 3 items then in relation to the Ecclesiastical Committee of Tynwald, moved by Mr. Crane. Mr. Hooper withdrew his all-island leisure rate and the transfer of regulator for reselling of gas. The latter because he feels he can deal with that in his new role in the DOI. The former because he was concerned that an amendment was going to add in a whole load of additional things, including, according to Mr. Hooper, a all-island rate for waste collection, which was interesting. So he chose to withdraw rather than have it amended. Then parking disc zones, Mr. Wannenberg moved, unsuccessfully, it's fair to say, a motion in relation to a petition from Ms. Andrea Kruger. The review of inclusive education policy was moved by Ms. Edge, and there was an amendment to that which effectively reduced the requirements of the motion. Ms. Edge was seeking a report, a detailed report. However, the amendment basically said, well, we were going to do this anyway. We're hoping to come back to Tynwald and explain ourselves by July 2025. I think Ms. Edge wasn't entirely satisfied with that, but it got support. And then there was a general debate on the future vision and direction for secondary education, which was, again, lots of members had quite a lot to say on that, which is encouraging, I suppose, for these general debates. The general debate, of course, means that you discuss the item, but you don't actually have a conclusion as such. There's no motion put, so it's just an opportunity for members to have their say. Then we got down to the orders, and normally the orders just fly through. However, it is fair to say that that wasn't the case when it came to the particular item 23. There was a fair amount of concern about this. This is effectively the removal of my card in relation to benefits, and of course benefits includes pensions, and the concern is that many pensioners still use my card, but this is going to be withdrawn. And that just squeaked through. 11-10 in Keys and 6-3 in Ledgeco. So quite surprising, that one. And then finally, the last of the orders that received a fair amount of interest was the Members of Tynwald Resettlement Grant. So this is effectively introducing measures so that if a member of Tynwald loses their seat in any election, they get a portion of their salary. I think it's for about 6 months, and then they're effectively out into the long grass, so to speak. The the Treasury had come forward with response to various recommendations that had been made, I think, by, was it an industrial tribunal or the court, I forget which. The Speaker of the House of Keys basically amended this motion and said, actually, you know what, you're supposed to give members an opportunity to have some say on this before it gets approved. This hadn't apparently been done, so the matter is to be referred to the Tynwald Management Committee in order for the consultation envisaged by standing orders to take place, and then the scheme is to be laid. It comes back to Tynwald in February 2025. So it's not a long delay; it's just a short delay to ensure that proper procedure has been followed. And that, I was going to say, I often think of saying in a nutshell, but it really isn't. That was January Tynwald.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Manx Radio Newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.